compare yourself to who you are today, not to who someone else is. The proper comparison group for you is you yesterday. You're the only control group that's appropriate to you because you have a certain set of talents and possibilities and limitations and tragedies that are truly unique to you. It's a lot better to think about who you were and then to think, well, could you be somewhat better in some dimension? And the positive thing about that is the answer is almost always yes. Plus, your bloody comparison is also a delusion. You know, that's another thing that you have to understand is that you look at the person you're jealous of. You're looking at the thin slice of their life that's turning out the best, right? And you have no idea what the horror of that person's life might be in its totality.
In this 3-hour-long podcast video with Jordan Peterson, he was dropping down so much incredible information. I took pages and pages worth of notes, and I condensed it down to the top 8 lessons for you so you don't have to spend all that time. And if there's a particular lesson that you want to skip ahead to, just take a look at the timestamps. Lesson number 1. Jordan provided his insight as to why he thinks so many young adults are suffering with anxiety and depression. Simply put, he believes a lot of people are focusing on themselves and have the wrong idea that they have to do all this internal work and that's it. His solution is more of a combination. Yes, do the internal work, but make sure externally you're connected, that you have responsibilities, close ties, because you're not just a single individual, you're connected to the group. So that means your close family, your community, etc. And I would agree with this. If you look back at history, it wasn't just me, the individual. It was the family unit. How do we get through this together? As a community, how do you have a good reputation and help each other out, that we can rely on each other in case something were to happen? My theory is that phones provided us with a lot of amazing technology and features, but one of the downsides is that it made us more self-absorbed.
So a recent report was released by the Harvard Graduate School of Education detailing the drivers of anxiety for young adults aged 18 to 25. 34% reported feelings of loneliness. 51% said achievement pressure negatively impacted their mental health. 58% reported lacking meaning or purpose in their lives in the last month. 50% reported that their mental health was negatively influenced by not knowing what to do with my life. There has been much examination of the well-being of teens aged 14 to 17. Not much has been known about those occupying the critical young adult years, and yet young adults report roughly twice the rates of anxiety and depression as teens. The young adults are not okay.
Why might young adults be lost? Well, part of it is that they're thinking, I'm not trying to be judgmental of a whole generation. It's a form of thought. Your mental health isn't dependent on you. That's not the right way to think about it. I don't think you can be mentally healthy in the absence of a long-term stable relationship. So you have to be married. Let's make that part of the precondition for successful adaptation as a young adult. You have to be married. So you have to establish a relationship with someone that integrates sexuality, that's there for the long run. Because there for the long run is the same as sane. There for tomorrow, there for the next minute, that's not sanity, that's impulsiveness. That's aimlessness. They're the same thing. If it's all about what you want right now, or more accurately, all about what something in you wants this moment, that's the definition of immature insanity. You have to commit. So you commit to someone else, you commit to your family, you commit to your community. Like, there are multiple levels of identity that stretch out into the social world. And voluntarily adopting those levels of hierarchical responsibility gives you an identity. It gives you a purpose. It protects you from anxiety. It does that in all sorts of ways. Like, you said earlier that one of the things you do is seek for validation, and you related that to uncomfortable experiences you had when you were very young. Well, it might not be precisely that you're seeking for validation. You might be properly investigating how you should be embedded in a social hierarchy at every possible level. It's like, well, people think their mental health is something that they just carry around in their head, and that if they just got the way they looked at the world right, or if other people just played their game, that all of a sudden they'd be mentally healthy. It's like, There's no difference between thinking about yourself and being miserable. Technically, if you look at, you can group descriptive statements about yourself statistically. All the descriptors that are reflective of self-consciousness load on negative emotion.
Can you not think about yourself in a positive way?
Probably not.
Really?
Not. Well, let's take that apart. You like doing your podcast and you feel positive about it. Okay, but your podcast isn't about you, right? So if you're thinking about how you're of utility to a broad number of people, maybe you would take some satisfaction in that, but that isn't exactly thinking about yourself, is it? It's thinking about the relationship you've established with other people, and it's a relationship of responsibility.
Lesson number 2, tell the truth. It covers the obvious case where you may have made a mistake, you did something that you shouldn't. Just confess, say what you did, take the short-term consequences, and move forward. But in this regard, he also added on being your authentic self. For example, going to an interview. How many times do we put on this professional mask and behave in such a way that's more likely to get us the job? And we think that's progress, and that's great. But in the long term, we could be shooting ourselves in the foot. Because by truly showing who you are, you're being more authentic to yourself, genuine, the other person knows what they're getting, and you can establish a more solid, realistic foundation. One of the main benefits is you have a more solid foundation. You can build on it, you can battle test it, and you can take that data to different aspects of your life. But if you have a fake persona, you're going to get fake results. So when you do try to show your true personality, you're not even going to know what to do. Now, by being your authentic self, you could face a lot more rejection. But if you continually lie about who you are and your personality, you become what you practice. It's better to follow the path that's true to you and to your instincts and see what adventure comes out of it versus being fake and just trying to build something that isn't real.
There isn't anything more adventurous than the truth. This is something that took me a long time to figure out. Well, you can craft your words to get what you want. And people do that all the time. They craft their words so they can avoid taking responsibility for things they should take responsibility for, or they can craft their words to gain an advantage that they really don't deserve. That's what you do when you manipulate. And the problem with that, you might say, well, why not do that if I can get what I want? And the answer to that is, you aren't necessarily the best judge of what you need. And it's easy to be deluded in what you want. And that's the sort of delusions that people chase if they chase power. If you decide instead that you're going to just say what you believe to be true, you have to let go of the consequences. And you might think, well, I don't want to let go of the consequences because I want to control what's going on. But what you miss then is adventure, because if you don't control what's going on, you don't know what the hell's going to happen. And maybe that's exciting. And actually, there's no doubt about it. And then you have the additional advantage if you're attempting to say what you believe to be true and attempting to act in the manner that you think is most appropriate. That's genuinely you, and you have the force of reality behind you. Obviously, that's what you have if you're trying to, say, live in the truth, is you have the force of reality behind you. That seems like a good deal. Then you have the reality and the adventure. So why is that a moral obligation? Well, if you hide and you don't let what's inside of you out, and you don't bring into the world what you could bring, and you become cynical and bitter, you will start doing very dark things. So you'll start, not only will you not add to the world what you could add, but you'll start being jealous of people who are competent and doing well and work to destroy them. So that's the pathway to hell, really.
Lesson number 3, aim for the highest good. Now, Jordan Peterson, he's very religious, and I'm not going to get into okay, you should be, you shouldn't be, but I always like to listen to the lessons. And I think that from the biblical stories, he's able to extract a lot of these lessons and provide it in a way that can be very helpful to us today. Because sometimes people are dealt a really bad hand. It's truly unfair. But what's the best solution? Give up? No. Kind of complain? No. It's to improve, continue to move forward, and make the best with what you have. Here's a different situation I've been thinking about. What if somebody is bad? Like they lie, they cheat, they steal. You know that they're not going to stop, but they are putting in somewhat of an effort to reduce it. Is that good? My answer is yes, because a -2 is better than a -6. So even though you know that they're going to mess up, they're going to do some dirty, shady stuff, it's better that they're putting in the effort to do less of it, because as a whole, it benefits us.
And it's in those difficult situations where the search for gratitude becomes something that is by necessity deeper and more difficult. But that doesn't mean it's not appropriate. And there is a very tight association between loving your enemy and being grateful in spite of the terrible things that occur in your life. I've been writing about the book of Job, and Job is a story of unjust suffering, fundamentally. God deems Job a good man. So we have it on God's word that Job is actually a good man. And then all hell breaks loose, partly because God makes a bet with Satan, which is, a hell of a thing to do, and says, do your worst. He's not going to turn on me no matter what you do. And so Job, despite his torment, he becomes very ill. He loses everything he has. His friends, he becomes ill in a way that's disfiguring. His friends come around and laugh at him and tell him that he's a bad man, and that's why all these terrible things have been happening to him. And it's brutal. And Job refuses to lose faith in himself. He says, look, I'm not perfect. But as far as men go, I've done what I should do, and I'm not being punished in some manner that's obviously related to my sin. It's more like the random play of tragic forces in the world. I'm not going to lose faith in myself no matter what. And I'm also not going to, his wife says, shake your fist at God, curse him and die. Because things have gone so badly for Job, she thinks that's all that's left to him, and he refuses to do that. So he maintains faith regardless of what's happened to him. And that's really the moral of the story of Job, which is that you are morally obligated to maintain faith no matter what happens to you. And there's a practical side to that. So imagine that God and Satan conspire against you. There'll be times in your life where it feels like that's happening. And then imagine that your reaction to that is to become bitter and resentful and hostile. Well, then whatever hell you're in, merely as a consequence of the confluence of tragic events, you have opened a whole other hell underneath it. The hell of bitterness and resentment and ingratitude. And that turns into the desire for revenge very, very quickly. You think things are bad just because they're bad. You wait till you see how bad they can become if you allow yourself to be corrupted by your unjust suffering, right? And so I do think that this is the most practical possible advice that can be given to people, which is that you are morally required to maintain faith, to aim up, and to treat other people the way you would want to be treated, no matter what's happened to you. And that's a hell of a thing to say. And, you might say, well, that's impossible. Some people have such brutal lives that they're destined to be corrupt. But I would say that's not true. Like, I've met many people, particularly in my clinical practice, who had lives that were so brutal that you couldn't even listen to them without it like breaking you into pieces. Brutal childhoods of a depth of malevolence you can hardly conceptualize, who decided despite that they were going to aim up and they were going to maintain faith in themselves and the world. And so it's like, that's on the table for people.
It seems like an odd paradox that the people who have been brought up under lives of the most privileged are often the ones that have the most complaints about the world, and people who have been brought up in deprivation a lot of the time are able to be perfectly in gratitude. It seems very strange that's the way.
Lesson number 4, all paths lead to Rome. If you feel this urge, this need to do something, do it. Now you may be thinking to yourself, it's not going to be worth it. What's the benefit? It doesn't matter, because it's going to eventually drift you into different directions that can benefit you, but you just can't see it at this point.
Anyways, Moses is just going about his business as a shepherd, which was a very tough job in those days. And this thing catches his eye, this glimmer, this gleam, and he goes to investigate. Okay, so what does that mean? It means as you're progressing through life, something will capture your interest. And in the story you just told, it's like somebody decides they're going to start going to the gym. There's something about becoming physically fit that calls to them, right? Which is an interesting thing, right? Because it calls to them. It's not even necessarily a decision they make. It's more like a possibility that makes itself manifest that's of interest. So they decide to pursue it. So they look into it more deeply. Well, so Moses approaches the burning bush and he gets closer and closer, right? And a bush is a symbol of life, right? Like it's a tree of life. And a tree of life that's on fire is being, that's the life, the tree, and becoming, that's the fire, the transformation. So a burning bush is a symbol of being and becoming as such. Now it's something that beckons. Okay, so now you pursue your physical fitness because it's called to you. And you concentrate more and more on it, you get more and more disciplined. But as you get more and more disciplined, you start to transform, right? And so your vision starts to change. Now, what happens to Moses is that as he gets closer and closer to the burning bush, he starts to realize that he's on sacred ground. So he's going deeper. The investigation is taking him deeper. So he takes off his shoes and continues to approach. He's still going down the same trail, right? Pursuing this thing. And then the voice of God itself speaks to him from the midst of the burning bush. And that's what turns him into a leader. And so what does the story mean? It means that as you walk through life in your normal mode, things will call to you. And if you pursue them, they will take you deep. It doesn't really matter what it is that calls. What matters is that you pursue it and you pursue it to the depths. And as you pursue it to the depths, you will become transformed. And if you do that without reservation, that will turn you into the person who frees the slaves and opposes the tyrants. And that is how it works. That's the call. And that can happen in any direction, virtually any direction. You just have to pursue it with sufficient faith, right?
There was one of the other rules that didn't make it into your book. Nothing well done is insignificant.
Right. Yeah, well, you accrue. So Christ tells his followers in the Gospels to store up treasure in heaven, not in the places that moths can eat and rust can destroy. Well, what is that? What is meant by that? Well, it's meant by it means the same thing that you just pointed to, which is that if you run yourself through a disciplinary process, so you accomplish something, maybe you don't attain the goal you were aiming at, but you accrue a new way of looking at the world and a set of skills. Well, if you just keep doing that, you have multiple ways of looking at the world and more skill. Well, that's your storehouse of treasure. You know, the reason women use wealth as a proxy for attractiveness is because wealth is a proxy for competence. It's not competence because you can be rich and useless. Now, it's not that easy, but it can at least happen temporarily. But women use markers of wealth to assess competence. And the competence is the treasure, not the wealth. Because if you're competent, you could be thrown into the desert and you'll make it bloom.
I've said this about people that go to the gym. So from the outside, someone that goes to the gym and has got a good body or whatever, there's the body, and this is what you get to touch during sex and when you're intimate, right? But the story that someone who has a good body tells you about the sort of person that they are is much more important, I think, than the way that it manifests physically. It's someone who is reliable, who is able to overcome hard things, who is self-disciplined.
Disciplined.
Yeah,
it's a marker for discipline.
It's just this whole big, long laundry list of things. They're able to deal with pain and discomfort, which is kind of sexy in a way.
And it's the perfect materialist disciplinary strategy, right? Because it's very concrete. Well, you change your body. It's like, is that a spiritual pursuit? Well, it is insofar as it requires long-term discipline and sacrifice. And you might hope, and I think this is likely the case, that, you can get stuck in the bodily self-improvement niche and focus on that too obsessively, but you can also use it as a stepping stone to discipline pursuit itself. And lots of people do that.
Lesson number 5. A lot of things come in layers and phases. When Jordan Peterson was doing this podcast, he was talking about many different things. Things like, all right, this is the first phase, this is the next one, and the next one.
The people who are using fear to garner power point to the various apocalypses that might befall us. And it's difficult to counter them because the future is always an apocalyptic horizon. Like everything can fall apart and has before and might well again and will, in fact, in your life as you age and die. And so it's very easy to conjure up an apocalypse. Then the question becomes not, is that apocalypse potentially real? Because the answer to that is yes, but what attitude should you have towards that? Naive, that's not good. Cynical, that's better, but it's still not good. It's another form of hell, and it also tends to make the potential apocalypses more likely. Well, so what do you have when you move beyond cynicism? And what you have when you move beyond cynicism is wisdom. And that's not naive, it's courageous. It's very interesting to see in our culture, back to the hopelessness and despair that you were mentioning that's characterizing young adults' life. It's like, well, it's all about me. That's the self-esteem movement. But then me becomes, it's all about what I want. And then that becomes, it's all about what I want right now. Then it's what the lowest part of me wants right now, and to hell with everyone else. It's like, okay, how are you going to play that game without being desperate? You're going to be desperate as soon as you start playing that game. And the other thing, it's even worse than that, because you're going to end up with the Jeremy, the porn star problem. Anybody, you're not going to be very happy about being with the people who want to play that game with you, because they're not going to be the people that are really going to make you feel that life is worth living. They're going to be the people, especially on the female side, women who are willing to take advantage of themselves for short-term sexual gratification. Those aren't happy women. They're usually damaged women. And if they're not damaged when they start playing that game, they're going to be plenty damaged by the time they're done with it.
Lesson number 6, don't compare yourself and don't be jealous of others. And this one hit me watching this, because I have high standards for myself, and I do look to see where I should be, or at least what I think I should be. But in the meantime, when they're saying, you don't know the work that they put in, you don't know the scars, you don't know the burdens that they're dealing with, you only get like a slight glimpse as to the positives that they have, but you don't get to see the rest. And would you be able to handle that? Would you want that? Like, ooh, that's deep.
I've been talking about in the live shows is your comparison group is incorrect. The fact that, you know, we have the opportunity to sit down and listen to anybody on the planet, right? The best minds, the best athletes, the best thinkers, the most articulate that are alive right now, or listen to the people that have died that were around when video cameras existed. And you can compare yourself to that group.
Yeah.
But that's not your comparison group. If you have the impetus to sit down and listen to me and you waffle on for 3 hours about these deep topics, these interesting ideas, you are so already selected out of the normal group. Mm-hmm. You're already asking yourself questions that
the right questions.
almost nobody else is, right? But because your comparison group are people that are unbelievably high performing. I remember before I started my podcast, I'd listen to you or to Sam or to Joe, and I'd think, God, their recall is amazing. It's so it's like they've just got this eidetic memory, and everything that they've ever read is able to come to the surface, and they're able to say it in this way that's completely seamless and all the rest of it. You go, okay, well, are you really person that's never recorded a podcast before going to compare yourself to Joe Rogan, man that's recorded 1,000 and spent 10,000 hours on stage and done all of this UFC commentary and done all of this stuff in terms of TV? Is that really who you're going to compare yourself to? And it's unfair. And the problem that I see is people who have big dreams for themselves and want to do great things, they like to set their sights high.
Yeah.
And yet they feel despondent in the comparison. Yeah. So I think
there's a pride in that too, eh? Like
I can be, I want to be.
Well, or that's who I should be comparing myself to, right? That's the pride. And the pride is something like, I should be that, or even I could be that. It's like, well, maybe you could, but you're certainly not going to do it, as you already pointed out, without the apprenticeship, right? So you could say that the despondency is actually, is in proportion to the false pride. Now, I wrote a chapter in, I think, my first book, which was compare yourself to who you are today, not to who someone else is. Sorry, I mangled that to some degree, but you get the point. The proper comparison group for you is you yesterday. Because you can make, first of all, you're the only control group that's appropriate to you, because you have a certain set of talents and possibilities and limitations and tragedies that are truly unique to you. And so you might be comparing yourself to someone else on some dimension, but it's not a reasonable comparison because you don't know what talents they were blessed with, and you also don't know what opportunities they had that you didn't, etc. It's just not a reasonable comparison. It's a lot better to think about who you were and then to think, well, could you be somewhat better in some dimension? And the positive thing about that is the answer is almost always yes. Now, you can orient that transformation towards some stellar target, and that's a reasonable thing to do, but that doesn't exactly mean that you should compare yourself to that target. Aiming at something and comparing yourself to it are not exactly the same thing. Plus, your bloody comparison is also a delusion. You know, that's another thing that you have to understand is that you look at the person you're jealous of, and really what you're doing is you're looking through a very narrow aperture at a very thin slice of their life. You're looking at the thin slice of their life that's turning out the best, but you're also looking at a thin slice of their life that's marketed to be the best, right? And you have no idea what the horror of that person's life might be in its totality. And you have no idea if the deal was, say you wanted to be Russell Brand. There's a good example. You wanted to be Russell Brand. You wanted to be as charismatic and as famous as he is. Well, your real wish is that you get to have everything Russell Brand has, but none of his problems. Well, come on. I mean, it's no wonder that a vision like that would make you despondent because it's naive, it's resentful, it's jealous, it's bitter, and it's unreasonable. You have to take the good with the bad. You have to take the bad with the good. And people rarely think about that when they're thinking about, the famous people they think they'd like to be.
There was a recent interview with Elon Musk where he said something, "My mind is a storm. I don't think most people would want to be me.
Right.
They may think they would want to be me, but they don't. They don't know. They don't understand."
Mm-hmm.
Lesson number 7, the power of communication. And this is such a core component for me. I believe in this so strongly, and I think a lot of people lack in this area. They rather choose the short-term peace at the cost of long-term benefit. The way how I go about it is I have an emotional side and a logical side, and I want to talk from the logical side. It doesn't mean that I disregard my emotions. It just means I don't talk from a place of emotions. When I'm logically speaking, I can say, hey, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling mad. But I'm not like, I'm feeling mad. Oh my God.
I'm being annoyed by my child. Okay, so what questions do you ask? Am I a tyrannical son of a bitch who's touchy? Well, that's why you need your wife, because you can go ask her, my kids are annoying me. Am I a tyrannical son of a bitch who's touchy? And she said, yeah, you probably need something to eat, or you're a bit of a prick that way. And you got to listen because maybe it's you. Or maybe she says, yeah, that goddamn child's been getting on my case too. And then you ask each other, are we mutually tyrants? It's like, no, that kid's annoying. Okay, do we want him to be annoying? Well, if you love your child, then the answer to that would be no. Because if he's annoying you, he's going to annoy other people. He's going to annoy his potential friends. He's going to annoy other adults. He's going to go through the world being annoying, and everyone's going to frown at him. That's not helpful. So then you could just fix it. And that's going to cause some short-term upset. Maybe you have a 13-month-old child who's very extroverted and disagreeable, who rules the roost. And every time the mother goes more than a foot away from her, she has a squawk fit because she's learned to control. Maybe the mother, was still tied up with infant care and can't put down a boundary. And so now you have to do something about this emerging monster of a 14-month-old child. And one of the things you do is every time the child is bossy, first of all, you note it, and you note that you're not very fond of yourself for being tyrannized by a 14-month-old. That's a bit of a status hit, like it should be. So you have to notice, I'm annoyed by this child. Well, then I should do something about it. Well, it's going to cause short-term emotional distress. The same thing occurs when you're dealing with your partner. It's like, you're annoying me. Okay. Now, maybe that's me. So I should maybe we should have a talk about that. You're annoying me. Convince me that it's me. And I should listen because maybe it's me. And if I'm annoyed about you, and I shouldn't be, I should fix that. but maybe it's you. So let's find out exactly what's going on. And that'll usually, man, there's just constant thrust and counter thrust in a discussion like that. And usually, the conversation will circle around whatever the hell the issue is till you get to the bottom of it, and God only knows where that is. But then maybe you can sort it out. And if you sort out enough of those things, you live in peace. And that's something worth attaining. And I've thought forever in my marriage, there's nothing too small to fight about. Now, I put in some rules that I used to have with my clients too. It's like, if someone bugs you, you should note that. And you shouldn't do anything about it, probably. If they bug you twice the same way, then you think, oh, okay, that's twice. But probably still you shouldn't do anything about it. But if they bug you 3 times, then you can say, here's what you just did. And they'll say, well, no, I didn't do that. And then you say, yeah, you did. And you did exactly the same thing in this other situation. And you did exactly the same thing in this other situation. So don't be telling me you didn't do it because you did it 3 times and I watched. Okay, now they come up with reasons they did it. And maybe some of them have to do with what a stupid son of a bitch you are. And you should listen because maybe they're right. But that's at least the beginnings of the process by which you unravel the problems. You want to figure out, well, we don't want to do this. This isn't the way we want to treat each other. We want to get to a place where our whole life is like the best moments of the best dates we ever had. That's a good goal. And that's attainable.
Lesson number 8, be humble, seek the truth, ask the stupid questions, even if it feels painful in the short term.
Well, if I'm conducting a podcast, let's say, I'm paying attention to what I don't understand. I'm not thinking. It's not the same thing. I mean, sometimes I think because the person will say something and it'll set off a train of thoughts. But often what I'm just doing is like, well, do I understand what you just said? That's a matter of attention. I have to note my ignorance. I'm attending to my ignorance. Well, this is what Rogan's great at this. You're great at this as well. If you attend to your ignorance, then you know what to do. You just ask the question. It's like, well, I don't understand this. That's a form of humility, to attend to your ignorance. That's a good thing for those who worship the Luciferian intellect to do, is to attend to their own ignorance. It's not about what you know. It's about what you don't know. You already know what you know. So why not investigate what you don't know? Well, how do you do that? You attend to your ignorance. What's the definition of humility? Humility is attending to your ignorance. And you can do that wherever you are.
Is that not still an intellectual exercise? Here are the holes in what I know, therefore I'm just going to continue to ask the questions until I fill them?
Well, it's not something completely divorced from... It's the difference between questioning and answering. Like I would say, this is, let's say, definitional. The Luciferian intellect has an answer.
When you say Luciferian intellect, what's that?
The Luciferian intellect is the intellect that wants to place itself in the highest position. And there's lots of people, smart people tend to be Luciferian because they think that their fundamental value is their intelligence. And they think that intelligence is the fundamental value. And then they're often very annoyed if they're very bright and the world doesn't lay itself out at their feet because they think, well, I'm so smart, everything should just be coming my way. Because they've prided themselves on that. It's like, well, and intellectual pride, well, that might be the cardinal sin. The Luciferian intellect is the intellect that wants to put itself in the highest position. It challenges God. That's what Satan is. That's what Lucifer is, literally, in the Miltonian story, is Lucifer is the spirit who attempts to usurp God. That's what the communists did. That's what the fascists did. That's what we do when we build towers of Babel. And we can easily elevate the intellect to the highest possible place, especially smart people. They do that all the time. It's better to attend to what you don't know. This is why Rogan's a very good example of this, because Rogan is not an intellectual. He's a seeker. Those aren't the same thing. Rogan is always like a bloodhound. He's on the path of what he doesn't know. And the consequence of that is he knows a lot. 2,000 podcasts, 2,500 podcasts. He's done like 2,500 high-level graduate seminars, something like that. It's crazy. And so his questions get better and better as he fills in the gaps. Is it intellectual? No, it's not. There's a difference between an intellectual pursuit and a spiritual pursuit. And the remediation of your own ignorance is a spiritual pursuit. It's predicated on humility. How am I stupid? How can I fix that? One of the things I really taught my kids, tried to teach them, was ask stupid questions, right? And that means you have to admit to your own insufficiency. That's what humility is. And then you have to publicly announce it. Here's how I'm stupid. Can you fix me? And sometimes that is embarrassing, although much less frequently than people think. Usually, if you're in a crowd and you have a stupid question and you've been paying attention, 80% of the crowd has the same question. And they're relieved that, you asked it. In fact, they'll think you're brave. It's so interesting, because you're afraid when you ask a question, if you're in a university seminar, you're afraid that what you're going to do is expose your stupidity and be, what would you say, shamed. And what happens is exactly the opposite, is everybody who's too cowardly to ask that question now thinks that you're courageous. It's exactly the opposite of what you think. Yeah, that happens all the time. Always in my graduate seminars, the kids that asked the most ignorant questions, assuming they were paying attention, because you can ask a stupid question, Stupid question is you're fiddling with your phone and the class has just covered something and you didn't notice and you ask, clue in. That's not a real question. You're just wasting people's time. But if you're genuinely ignorant, I never had a student who asked a genuine question that I thought was a stupid question. Never. And I'd never treat a student that way. It's like, no, it's so cool too, because sometimes the stupidest questions cut to the heart of the chase. It's the kids who would ask a really basic question that also forced me to really understand what I was teaching. And that's a reflection of their humility. It's that humility in the pursuit of the ideal. That's not an intellectual exercise. Not in the strict sense. It's definitely what generates knowledge, though.
That seems to be a good stepping block toward earned wisdom as well.
That's earned wisdom, yeah. Yep, earned wisdom through humility.
All right, I'm going to give you a bonus. It's my absolute favorite. So if you take anything away from this video or my YouTube channel, it's this. Progress is exponential, both from a positive aspect and also from a negative aspect. Think about how many times you gave up on your diet and then all of a sudden that led to another bad habit, and all of a sudden you're spiraling downwards. On the flip side, when it comes back to working out, we're like, oh, it's going to take forever. I don't even want to take the first steps. But the thing is, once you get started, that's the most difficult part, because then the progress, likewise, goes exponentially up easier and you get into more great habits as a result.
The ultimate ideal is also the ultimate judge, because the ultimate ideal is something against which you fall far short. And that might be so painful that you can barely stand it. But then what you do is you two things, I suppose, is you lower the ideal and you raise your estimation of your potential. And what do I mean by lower the ideal? Well, if you're comparing yourself to someone or even to a future self, and the gap is so painful that it paralyzes you, then you've created a dragon that you don't have the tools to master. And so what you have to do is you have to scale the dragon down to size. And you want to scale the dragon down to size until it's a size that you are willing to move toward, however small that is. Now, if you're here and your ideal is here and that gap is unbearable, then you reduce the gap and you reduce the gap. And you're going to have to do that anyways, because you're not going to move from where you are to perfect in one fell swoop, right? There's going to be incremental steps. So you have to fill in that hierarchy of progression with a high enough resolution representation so that you can start to move forward. And then you should be buttressed. There's another gospel comment that's very interesting. It's called the Matthew principle. And the Matthew principle is, to those who have everything, more will be given, and from those who have nothing, everything will be taken. Now, it's brutal because it implies that reality works like this. When you're moving up, you go like this, right? And that's pretty nice. That's a lot better than this. But when you're going down, you go like that, right? It's like downhill, cliff. Okay, so you want to avoid the downhill path. Well, if the uphill path is like this, which is like exponential, let's say, or geometric, then what that means is that it doesn't matter how big the first steps you take uphill are, even if they're trivial, even if they're shameful in their size, because you're so useless, that if you're disciplined in that, you'll speed up extraordinarily rapidly. And so that's the good news, you might say, is that you can take very small steps, even ones that might be shameful in their size, and you have to admit that to yourself. But once you get the ball rolling, it doesn't roll in a linear fashion. It rolls in a geometric fashion. And this is a really good thing to know, because it can take the sting out of the realization of your own stupidity. It's like, yeah, you know, everybody has their weak sides, let's say, things they're embarrassed about. When I first started going to the gym, I was like, how old was I? 1985, 23. And I think I weighed 135 pounds and I was 6'1", very, very thin. A 27-inch waist, something like that. And I smoked like mad and I drank too much. Like I wasn't in good shape. The first attempts forward I took in the gym, I went to this swim exercise class. Jesus, it was me and this like really fat guy, young guy, probably not in any worse shape than me, and like 7 old women over 70, and they could outswim me. Like it was pretty damn humiliating. And so I did a semester of that and got myself in somewhat better shape. And then I started to go to the gym to work out, to lift weights. And that was also rough because, you know, I'd be underneath the bloody bench press trying to lift 75 pounds off the rests. And, you know, some muscle-headed bastard would come over and tell me how to do it. And it's like, yeah, thank you. But, you know, it's embarrassing. And lots of times people won't do things like go to the gym because they're so embarrassed about how they look or what sort of shape they're in. And it's a pain to start at the bottom. But you start at the bottom where you're weak. And if you want to rectify what's weak, you have to accept the fact that you're at the bottom and that the first steps are going to be painful. You know, it took me about 3 years, but I stopped smoking and then I stopped drinking and I gained 40 pounds of muscle in like 3.5 years, something like that. I basically had to stop doing that because I had to eat like 6 times a day. It was crazy. But I got a lot more physically confident and a lot more coordinated, because working out with dumbbells makes you coordinated, right? Because it exercises all the small ligaments and the tendons. And so my lower body in particular got a lot more coordinated. Then I could dance, so that was better when I was going out dancing, because I did a lot of that in graduate school. But the point of all this is, if you're going to rectify your weaknesses, you have to admit your insufficiency to your own shame. Now, if the gap between you and your ideal is so great that it paralyzes you, you shrink that. Right?
And if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. It takes a ton of time to watch the 3-hour podcast, take good notes, create these summary videos. So if you could do me a favor, like and subscribe, because on this channel, I want to help men improve their self-discipline by taking small, actionable steps. Because as in the words of Peter Parker, I'm trying to do better.